On May 10th, 1940, Nazi Germany invaded the Netherlands. And 5 days later, the Dutch unconditional surrender was signed. What plan of defense did the Dutch actually have? Was there a plan? Well, that and more you're gonna find out in this video. Keep watching. Good to have you back on the channel. If you're new, I'm Stefan, I'm a Dutch history teacher and I make videos about history for you. If you find it interesting, please consider subscribing and also hit that notification bell. Let's start. During the First World War, the Netherlands was neutral. When the Second World War broke out, the Netherlands remained neutral once again. Yet, on May 10th, 1940, the Germans invaded the country and 5 days later, the unconditional surrender was signed. With such a quick defeat, you can argue that the Dutch didn't have much of a plan to counter a German attack. Or did they?
De internationale toestand heeft de regering doen besluiten onze grenzen te versterken ter handhaving van onze neutraliteit.
The Dutch army mobilized towards the end of August 1939, when Britain and France declared war on Germany on the 3rd of September. The mobilization of the Dutch army was complete. Whether this army was ready for war was the question. The new Minister of Defense under the second De Geer cabinet was Major General Adriaan Dijkshoorn. He knew the army well. He soon would come into conflict with the new Commander-in-Chief, Isaac Reinders. The powers of both authorities were not well defined. It already started with the mobilization. Reinders wanted a state of siege. However, what he got was a state of war, which limited the powers of the military. However, in November a state of siege was declared, but only in the areas with military positions. And there were other topics Dijkshoorn and Reinders quarreled about, such as the mobilization clubs and the fact that Dijkshoorn was actually lower in rank than Reinders, but due to his status as Minister of Defense, he stood above Reinders. This would eventually lead to Reinders his resignation. But let's first look at his plans. Regarding the political situation in Europe at that time, it seemed likely that if the Netherlands was drawn into the war, it would be due to a German invasion. The Netherlands, just as in World War I, had a position of neutrality, yet because France and Britain were at war with Germany, it seemed likely that the Allies would become the allies of the Dutch once the Netherlands was attacked by Germany. In case of a German attack, the Dutch army had to hold out for several weeks or perhaps several months before help would arrive, the Dutch military high command assumed. Already in the 1920s, ideas were developed for the ideal defense of the country, a country that hadn't seen a foreign army on its soil since the Napoleonic era, although with the exception of German armies that were retreated through the Netherlands after World War I, but that's a story for another time. In the 1930s, concentration blue was worked out. Where this came down to was static defense. The southern provinces of Noord-Brabant and Zeeland needed to be defended as well, in order for the British to land and the French to deploy there. Reinders was criticized by other commanders, among which Van Voorst tot Voorst, who believed the field army should be more flexible and offensive. Van Voorst tot Voorst argued the field army had to perform an offensive maneuver at the Veluwe in order to drive the enemy south and continue the attack from Noord-Brabant. Van Voorst tot Voorst argued the Grebbelinie would be the most effective to launch an attack from. He saw the new Holland waterline as redundant. Pulling back to that line would lead to disaster due to its short distance from the Grebbelinie and the presumable enemy air superiority. The Grebbelinie, located in the Gelderland Valley, was reinforced with the predisposition of several casemates, but much work needed to be done. That's where the mobilized soldiers came in. In the months after the mobilization, they had to perform construction work, digging trenches and so forth, in order to make the Grebbelinie ready for defense. What had to become of Noord-Brabant? The area was vital for Allied cooperation. To what extent did it need to be defended? Now, the neutrality policy forbade the Dutch to discuss defense policies with Britain, France and Belgium. However, secretly the Dutch did have some talks with their southern neighbors. And the problem was the Pale Raam line. The Belgians did not want to extend this line across their country, which could have disastrous consequences for the Dutch defense of North Brabant. German attackers could circumvent the line via Belgium. Another line, the Orange Line across Den Bosch, Tilburg, Goorle, seemed to be an alternative. The Dutch heard that the French had Hypothesa Breda, which made clear that they would not help the Dutch defending the Pale Raam line. Reinders nevertheless held on to the Pale Raam line, and for this he actually had political motives. See, if he would fall back on the Orange Line, it would expose northern Belgium to a German attack. And if Germany would be defeated, the Netherlands could be held responsible for creating such a dangerous situation for Belgium. Besides, a battle at the Pale Raam line could buy the Dutch time for their allies to move in and deploy. Tensions between Reinders and the Dutch government mounted, and this led to Reinders' resignation on the 31st of January 1940. Henry Winkelman became the new Dutch commander-in-chief, but time was running out. On the 10th of January, a German military aircraft had made an emergency landing in Belgium. German documents were retrieved regarding the German invasion of the Low Countries. This affair was known as the Magellan Incident. Dutch military attaché in Berlin, Bert Sass, made clear a Dutch-German war seemed to be imminent. And the Dutch knew the Germans were interested in their territory, as the Venlo Incident, which occurred on the 9th of November the previous year, had proved, in which 2 British secret intelligence agents were captured 5 meters from the German border on the outskirts of the Dutch city of Venlo. Winkelman, more than Reinders, was aware that the Dutch field army was simply too small to defend the whole of the country. Choices of which line to man had to be made. Winkelman also realized that due to the lack of training and weapons, he could not rely on mobile or offensive warfare. So therefore he had to rely on static defense. Hold out till the Allies come. Now Winkelman enjoyed much more trust from the Dutch government and therefore enjoyed more freedom of movement. Winkelman chose for the Grebbelinie as the main line of defense. Due to its trees, it also provided more cover than the New Holland waterline. And as said before, pulling back from the Grebbelinie to the New Holland waterline was risky. East of the Grebbelinie was the IJssel line, which was only lightly manned. Demolition charges underneath the bridges across the IJssel River had to be detonated as soon as the Germans set foot on Dutch soil. What about North Brabant and the Pale Raam line? The Belgians needed to extend this line in order to make it a success. Now, I said before, Winkelman was not allowed to consult the military of other countries, but with all the risks involved, he did so. It didn't come to a joint plan, and Winkelman decided only lightly man the Pale Raam line. Now, just behind this line, the Dutch Light Division would be stationed in order to make it look like the line was fully manned. However, once the Germans attacked, the Light Division had to pull back to Fortress Holland. The Belgians concluded that the Dutch had chosen for strategic isolation. Strategie d'isolement.
Maar ondanks de vele opofferingen die de Nederlandse soldaat zich in deze spannende dagen moet getroosten, blijft de geest in ons leger uitstekend. Het Nederlandse leger waakt.
With the deployment of airborne troops during the German invasion of Denmark and Norway in April 1940, Winkelman reinforced troops near the main airfields near Amsterdam, Rotterdam and Den Haag. The The 3rd Army Corps was stationed more to the west in case of retreat. It would be easier to reach Fortress Holland. 6 extra infantry battalions were stationed on the Betuwe front. 6 other battalions were replaced from the east to the south of Fortress Holland. Inundations were already put in place and now extended. Dutch military attaché in Berlin, Bert Sass, warned an attack was going to take place on the 8th of May. When the Germans did not attack on this date, previously revoked leaves were allowed again. On the evening of May 9th, Sass reported that he was certain the Germans would attack the following day. Winkelmann also received alarming reports from border troops. Winkelmann therefore decided to send telex messages to the territorial commanders of Friesland, Overijssel and Limburg, as well as other commanders. Very disturbing messages are coming in from the border. Stay alert. At 10 in the evening, Winkelmann and Dijkshoorn spoke about barriers east of the Meuse and IJssel rivers. Troops were tasked with strategic security after 11. A full readiness was ordered for the 10th of May at 3 o'clock in the morning. When, by midnight on the 9th of May, Winkelmann left his office, he said to his colleague, "Now the gentlemen, the Germans, can come. We have done everything we can. I'm going home to catch a few hours of sleep." 4 hours later, the first German troops crossed the border. The German invasion of the Netherlands had begun. The first German troops that crossed the border were actually troops in disguise. They were dressed as Dutch police troops. Most of these patrols were intercepted by Dutch border guards. A few made it through to the IJssel line only to see that the bridges had been blown up in front of them. Some skirmishes did take place, after which the Dutch defenders retreated to the Grebbelinie according to plan. The Germans pushed through the north and the south of the country pretty unopposed. The Peelraam line was breached within a day. Air raids were carried out on specific targets and paratroopers were dropped near Dordrecht, Rotterdam and Den Haag. Den Haag, they were defeated. The Battle of the Grebbeberg lasted till May 13th. The Germans broke through there, but in the north they did not manage to push through across the Afsluitdijk. Also, German air landing troops got pinned down at Rotterdam and were not able to cross the bridges there. On the 14th, Rotterdam was bombed and the next day the Dutch unconditional surrender was a fact, with an exception of the southwestern province of Zeeland, which capitulated later. If you want to have the full story about the German invasion of the Netherlands, you can click right here. And if you want to learn about the Battle of Zeeland, it's actually quite a forgotten World War II battle that occurred in May 1940, you can click right here. I want to thank you for watching. Subscribe to this channel if you have not already. Leave a like, leave a comment, share this video with your friends, and see you later.